All right, last time we talked about truth, and I'm going to continue talking about truth today. And I want to remark that in a way, truth, not working? It's all right, but I have to hold it up like this. All right. Your theory of truth is a good test for your theory of language and indeed for your overall conception of philosophy. And in the 19th century, or early part of the 20th century, William James classified theories of truth into three different kinds. That classification is somewhat obsolete, but I want to remind you of it because it does illustrate the connection between, roughly speaking, truth and metaphysics. James said there are three general theories of truth. There's the correspondence theory, and there are different ways of formulating the correspondence theory, but the most common way is to say that a proposition is true if it corresponds to the facts. So the correspondence theory says the proposition that snow is white is true. It's true because, sorry, let me start that sentence again. The proposition that snow is white is a true proposition because that proposition corresponds to the facts. Now, there's always a puzzle. What fact does it correspond to? Well, it corresponds to the fact that snow is white. And that seems kind of boring to people, but that looks like it's a consequence of disquotation. We'll come back to that later. Okay, the correspondence theory of truth tends to fit with a certain metaphysic according to which there's a real world out there. And when we talk about it, sometimes we say true things. And the reason that what we say is true when it is true is because what we say is the case really is the case. It really does correspond to how things are in the real world. So the correspondence theory of truth goes with a certain metaphysics called realism, the idea that there's a reality that exists independently of our representations of it. I think metaphysical realism is absolutely right. I don't think you can even make sense out of challenging it because it's a background presupposition behind a large number of chunks of discourse, and I'll say more about that later. And indeed, maybe the whole subject of truth, it would be a good time to talk about relativism. And there's a little paper I wrote on my website, it's on my website, called A Refutation of Relativism. And I think I'll assign it to the course. It's very short. And just I got so tired of kids coming in and trying to get me, trying to defend relativism that I thought I should write something about it. So I will, if my colleagues will remind me, I'll put that on the B space. But you can find it on the web. It's on my website. And it's, I know, the way I find my website is I go to a thing called Google and write my name. I don't remember the address of the website, but it always comes up. And we will talk about relativism. But the correspondence theory tends to fit with a certain metaphysic. The metaphysics has said there is a real world that exists independently of our representations of it. And consequently, when we talk, at least some of the time, we say things that are true or at least false. And they're true if they correspond to how things are in the real world. And they're false if they don't correspond to how things are. That's called a correspondence theory of truth. Now, that seems like it's kind of common sense and maybe obvious, but it is frequently refuted, or at least attacked, and I will mention some of those attacks later on. In philosophy, you will have noticed there are certain default, what you might call, using a computer metaphor, default positions, the positions that keep coming back. I think dualism in the philosophy of mind is a kind of default position that, well, there are really two parts to our life. There's a physical part and a mental part. And I think in a way the correspondence theory of truth is a default position in the theory of truth because though it is frequently refuted, it keeps coming back. That doesn't mean it's right, but at least it means we have to take it seriously. Okay, now according to William James, there are two other theories which he called the Coherence Theory. And that says a belief or proposition is true if it coheres or coheres well with our other beliefs and propositions, our other beliefs and assertions. Now, that doesn't seem initially plausible at all, because, of course, you can have a crazy view that coheres with a lot of other crazy views. You can make the whole thing coherent. So it doesn't seem to be well motivated to see, well, a proposition is true because it coheres with other propositions. But the coherence theory was motivated not by an analysis of language, but by a certain metaphysic, and in particular by metaphysical idealism, which is opposed to metaphysical realism. And metaphysical idealism says, well, really, the world is ultimately mental. The world consists in representations. It consists in mental phenomena. And then you got a problem about truth because, well, if there isn't any non-mental reality for our mental beliefs to correspond to, then what could make a belief true? What could make a statement true if there's no independently existing reality? And the answer given by at least some idealists was, well, it's because it coheres with our other beliefs. So I think the coherence theory was never motivated by an analysis of the word true or by an examination of ordinary language. It was motivated by an idealism that says if we're going to have any use for the concept of truth at all, it can't mean corresponds to a reality that exists independently of our representations, because there is no such reality. The only reality is the reality of idealism. It's the only reality of mental phenomena. And as you all know, the most famous local idealist is the guy this town was named after, Bishop Berkeley, or as we like to call him, Berkeley. I'm not sure what the correct Irish pronunciation is. Oxford pronunciation is Berkeley. And he was, after all, bishop. I think he was Bishop of Oxford, in fact. But he was Irish, and I don't know how he called himself, but it's probably not Berkeley. Anyway, so we will cheerfully continue to mispronounce his name. And when I talk about the guy, I will call him by the American pronunciation, which is Berkeley. Okay, so Berkeley was a champion idealist, but he never gave a very good coherent statement of it. On the other hand, things got worse after Berkeley, and they went to Kant, who was a transcendental idealist, and then they fell off the deep end altogether with Hegel. I won't tell you about those guys. I think I haven't suffered enough. I've suffered enough already that I shouldn't be punished by trying to give a lecture on Hegel. I don't understand Hegel well enough to give a lecture. I do sort of understand Kant. I got so exasperated with a guy, I wrote a summary of his book, The Critique of Pure Reason. I thought I ought to rewrite it, as it ought to be rewritten, but I never, well, somehow I never got around to it. But anybody who wants to read what he actually said, get a hold of me and I'll give you a summary of The Critique of Pure Reason. But in any case, idealism and the coherence theory go hand in hand. Okay, now James himself endorsed the pragmatic theory of truth, according to which what is true is what it's most useful to believe. If it's useful to believe it, then it's true. If it's not useful to believe it, then it's not true. Well, that doesn't work either, because there are lots of things that are useful to believe that are really not true. Coaches routinely encourage their teams to believe that they can win, even that they're going to win, when it's pretty obviously not true that they are going to win. On the other hand, it is a useful falsehood, but that doesn't make it any, because it inspires the team, and maybe it might turn out to be true. There just is no match between truth and no exact match between truth and what it's useful to believe. It's often there is a match, because why is it useful to believe such and such? Well, it's useful to believe it because it's true. That is, you don't explain truth by appealing to usefulness to believe, but it seems to me the other way around. You explain why it's useful to believe it by saying that it's true. And what does that mean? Well, roughly speaking, it means because the way the proposition says that things are is the way they really are. And that sounds a lot like the correspondence theory. All right, so we're going to go back to the correspondence theory and consider some difficulties with the correspondence theory. I have to tell you, in the end, I think the correspondence theory is right. There are ways of misunderstanding it and ways of misstating it and versions of it that are wrong, but the basic intuition behind the correspondence theory, I think, has to be right. It's a background presupposition of our use of language that we use language to talk about a reality that exists independently of the language. And when we make assertive speech acts, the aim of those speech acts is to be true, that is to say, to represent reality as being a certain way when it really is that way. And that's another way of stating something like the correspondence theory. Okay, but now we have to consider some difficulties with the correspondence theory. It's frequently denied, and that I think is weird that it should be denied. I debated Richard Rorty in Minneapolis on the correspondence theory of truth, and it was hard for me to take the correspondence theory, his view, seriously, because, of course, almost everything he said presupposed some version of the correspondence theory. So he said, what time is your plane tomorrow? Are you flying? Do you have to change planes in Denver? Things like that. Now, the answers to those questions only make sense on the assumption I'm really talking about a reality that exists independently of my utterances, and what I'm saying will be true if the reality is the way the utterances say they are. Okay, but let me tell you famous objections to the correspondence theory. Number one, the correspondence theory seems to work well for certain favorite examples. The statement, the cat is on the mat, is true if and only if the cat is on the mat. That looks pretty good because it looks like you have a clear conception of how that's supposed to work. Here is the statement. The cat is on the mat. I had to give a lecture once in French about this, and it doesn't sound so great in French. Le chat est sur le paillasson. Well, that doesn't sound. The cat is on the mat has a nice ring to it that you don't get in French. Okay, but now that's the statement, and guess what? Here's the fact. You see, here's this kitty cat, and the cat is on the mat. So here you got the statement, and here you got the fact, and truth consists in the match. Now, this is not a picture, but still the elements of the statement actually seem to correspond to elements in the real world, right? You can actually nail them down. And this is on the is kind of tough, but it sort of comes around to the side. Okay, so you got a neat picture. And this is what drives a lot of philosophy, is the simple picture of how things have to work. And it looks like that's how truth works. Okay, so far so good, but now we're off and running. How about the dog is not on the mat? Okay, draw me a picture of that. Or if I say, there are no elephants in this room. What fact does that correspond to? If somebody says, well, there's a briefcase in this room, I can draw you a picture of the room that's got a briefcase in it. But what do I draw when I draw a picture of there are no elephants in this room? And it's certainly true that there are no elephants in the room. So there must be a fact that it corresponds to. But now, if the statement there are no elephants in the room corresponds to the fact that there are no elephants in the room, how about the statement there are no giraffes in the room? That's also true. We could check it out. I can check under the table and so on, but I'm pretty confident there are no giraffes in the room. But now, is that the same fact as the fact that there are no elephants? Because the picture of an elephant-free room looks an awful lot like a picture of a giraffe-free room. Everybody got that? That's a problem. So, people who worry about the metaphysics of realism often worry, are there negative facts? When Wittgenstein was writing his first book, The Tractatus, Bertrand Russell wrote him a letter in which he said, "Are there negative facts?" And Wittgenstein wrote back, "Of course not." God, what a question. How could there be negative facts? Well, why not? I mean, I think it is a fact that there are no elephants in this room, but it's hard to draw a picture of that. Okay, so that's one problem with the correspondence theory is how about negative facts? But then once you got negative facts, then all kinds of other problems arise. The statement the cat is on the mat is true. But how about the statement, if the cat had not been on the mat, then the dog would have had to have been in the kitchen, right? I won't write that out on the blackboard because I'm too lazy, but I'll repeat it again. If the cat had not been on the mat, then the dog would have had to have been in the kitchen. Draw me a picture of that. I haven't the faintest idea how to draw a picture of that. And this is a famous problem in philosophy, the problem of counterfactual conditionals. If it had not been the case that P, or if it had been the case that P, then it would have been the case that Q. See, I drop this piece of chalk and it falls, but now how about the proposition, if I had dropped it, it would have fallen. Well, that seems not so bad for this case, because we know how to draw a picture of the thing falling. But how about that one I gave you? If the cat had not been on the mat, then the dog would have had to have been in the kitchen. That's a tougher one to draw a picture of. So what are you going to do about these propositions that don't seem to have any corresponding relation to objects and arrangements of objects in the world? That is supposed to be a serious difficulty for the correspondence theory of truth. Now, another difficulty is it looks like that the correspondence theory of truth is going to lead to skepticism, because in order to find out if something is true, you'd have to find out if it really corresponded to things, how things are in the world. But in order to do that, you'd have to have the statement here and the fact over here, and then you'd have to, so to speak, jump outside of yourself and look and see if they really do match. Let me state the difficulty. If I say there's a briefcase in my left hand, and that's a true statement, then it looks like if I'm going to find out if it's true, I would have to find out if the statement, there's a briefcase in my left hand, corresponded to the facts. But then it looks like I'd have to hold up the statement, there's a briefcase in my left hand, and then I hold up the fact that there's a briefcase in my left hand, and it looks like in order to do that, I'd have to jump outside myself and look from the side to see if there really was this fact that corresponded to the statement, and you can't do that. There doesn't seem to be, there isn't any non-linguistic standpoint, any non-intentionalistic standpoint where you can survey the relations between representation and reality to see if they really do match. In philosophy, we always have the urge, if only we could, so to speak, jump outside of ourselves and look from the side and see if we're accurately representing how things are in the world. See, when I draw a picture of perception, I often am tempted to do it something like this. Here's the perceiver, and here's the object, and the perception reaches up to the object. But of course, if I am this guy, it doesn't look like that to me at all. It looks like this. That's all I actually see. Now, in order that I should actually be seeing that, it would have to be like this. But there's no way I can see that. For if I did jump outside myself and see that, well then, I'd still have the question, but was I actually seeing that? Because then I'd have to draw a three-dimensional picture of how that state of affairs was being represented in my visual experiences. So this is a constant urge we have in philosophy, is to somehow get free of language and intentionality to see if we can survey the relations between them and their conditions of satisfaction to see if it's really satisfactory. So this story goes, it's an objection to the correspondence theory. On the correspondence theory, you're bound to get skepticism as a result, because you cannot ever discover the relation of correspondence. You can look at the cat and you can look at the mat, but you can't look at the relationship between the statement the cat is on the mat and the fact that the cat is on the mat, because there's no way that you can survey that relationship from a non-linguistic standpoint. Now, there's a variant on this argument. That's the second argument, which the variant was stated by Peter Strawson, and here's how it goes. The correspondence theory of truth gives us a completely wrong picture of language, because we suppose there are two entities, the statement and the fact, and then we can survey the relationship between these two entities. But, says Strawson, there are not two independent entities. In order to answer the question, which fact, you have to make a true statement. So there cannot be independently ascertainable relations between facts and true statements, because when you identify the fact, which fact is it? The only way to identify the fact is to state a true statement. And this led Strawson to think facts aren't a separate class of entities at all. Facts, he says, are just what statements, when true, state. Let me repeat that, because that meant a lot to Strawson. Facts, there aren't a separate class of entities called facts. Facts are just what statements, when they're true, it's what they state. You see, we're tempted to think that the statement S is true is a disguised relational statement. Suppose I introduced a new adjective, northern, and I define northern as north of Portland, Oregon. Okay, then if I say Seattle is northern, well, that looks like it just identifies a property of Seattle, but in fact it's a relation, because it says Seattle is north of Portland. So if here's Portland, and here's San Francisco, and here's Seattle up here, then if I say Seattle is northern, that's really a disguised relational statement. It says Seattle stands in a certain relation to Portland, the relation of being north of Portland. Now, the correspondence theory is saying, well, that's what truth is. It's a disguised relational predicate, because when we say a proposition is true, we say, in fact, not that it has a property of truth, but rather it stands in a relation to something else, a relation of correspondence. So P is true really means there is a fact such that P corresponds to that fact. In the same way, Seattle is northern means there is a city, Portland, such that Seattle is north of Portland. Does everybody see the analogy there? So that's what the correspondence theory is supposed to give us a conception of, according to Strawson's reading of it. It's supposed to be that there is a relation between a statement and a fact, and the relation is one of correspondence. Now, Strawson thinks he has the decisive objection to that. He thinks this is absolutely conclusive. And I know that he believed this all his life, because I wrote an attack on it, and he published a reply to it. You can read it in it's the volume of the Library of Living Philosophers. It's my discussion of Strawson's views on truth, and he defends the position that he held in the 1950s, the position that there are no separate class of entities which are facts, but as he says, the word fact, like these other words, situation, state of affairs, they contain the word-to-world relations built into their very meaning. So you cannot explain truth by appealing to facts, because the notion of a truth really is part of the notion of a fact. Now, Frege went the next step. Frege said that's all a fact is. It's just a true proposition. I'll get to Frege's views in a minute. Strawson is bashful about actually saying that boldly, that a fact just is a true proposition. But something like that is in his view, that you can't separate facts from propositions, and you can't do this move where you look at Seattle and you look at Portland to see if Seattle is north of Portland, because in this case, you can actually identify Seattle and Portland independently. But Strawson's objection to that, he thinks, is a decisive objection. There aren't two separate entities, the true statement and the fact, because there's no way to identify the fact without stating a true statement. There's no answer to the question, which fact, which doesn't identify a true statement. Another way to put the objection is this. If you think that the correspondence theory explains the notion of truth by saying a truth is a statement that corresponds to a fact, then you ought to be able to first identify the statement and then identify the fact and then see if they really correspond. But there's no way you can do that, because once you identify the fact, you've already stated a true statement. Does everybody see that point? There isn't any fact independent of a true statement, according to Strawson, because when you state the true statement, you have stated a fact. And that's what he was getting at when he said a fact is just what a statement, when true, states. Now, there was a famous debate between Austin and Strawson, two of my teachers. This happened before I ever met either of them, but it was a famous debate because Austin defended the correspondence theory, and Strawson came out with this claim that a fact is just what a statement, when true, states, and Austin called that a perverted little rigmarole. He says, suppose I say, wives are what men, when they marry. Is that supposed to be one in the eye to wives? It's supposed to devalue their ontological status? Suppose I say women are what men, when they marry. Does that show that women don't exist independent of marriage? That they have no independent reality? And Austin was quite exasperated at this. So he wrote, there was a debate between Austin and Strawson, and you can read it, it's a lot of fun. And then there was a continuation at a meeting in Oxford of the Faculty Philosophy Society where Austin and Strawson debated. And there was a young philosopher named Oscar Wood who was actually rather naughty. He was sitting next to a blackboard, and every time Austin scored a point, he would reach over and make a mark. And every time Strawson scored a point, he would reach over and make a mark. And then people were watching his marks. It's just all he put was put marks on the blackboard, no names or anything. But everybody in the room was watching to see how the score was going. And I forget how it turned out, but I know that Strawson won. Strawson won by 7-4 or something like that. So this is sort of the bad underbelly of analytic philosophy where this goes on. But in any case, it did go on, and it was generally agreed that Strawson had won the argument, that Austin did not succeed in defending the correspondence theory. Okay, so we've got three different objections to the correspondence theory, and anybody who takes the correspondence theory is going to have to answer those objections. The first objection is you can't deal with a large range of propositions. You can't deal with negative propositions, hypothetical propositions, counterfactual propositions. It looks good for the cats on the mat, but cats on the mat, those words have to mean the same. If the cat, in the sentence, if the cat had been on the mat, then the dog would have had to have been in the kitchen. And we don't know what fact. That might be true, but we don't know what fact it corresponds to. So that's the first objection. Now, the second objection is, well, it looks like you're going to get some kind of skepticism because you can never find out if a proposition is true, because you, in order to verify it, you'd have to get outside of the system of language and survey the relations between language and reality. And so this argument goes, there is no way that we can ever get outside our own mental reality, our own mental and linguistic reality, our own system of representation, to survey the adequacy of that system to the reality that it represents. So if you believe the correspondence theory, you're forced to skepticism. You're locked inside your own solipsistic prison of it's hard to avoid this poetic metaphors. You're locked in your own solipsistic prison of language and thought. You can never get outside of it. And I think that's what drives idealism, is the feeling, look, all I have to go on is this experience, these thoughts, these words, and I can never break outside of that. And the correspondence theory is bound to lead to skepticism because it demands that I break outside in a way that I can't. Okay, so that's the second objection. Now, the third objection is more subtle, and that says there cannot be a genuine relation of correspondence because the two terms of the relation are not independently identifiable. And that's Strawson's objection to the correspondence theory. Okay, so the correspondence theory is challenged. I don't think there's much to be said for the pragmatic or the coherence theory. They have no initial plausibility. The pragmatic theory says, well, it's useful to believe what's true. Yeah, generally it is. I mean, if you believe that the Earth is flat and you're flying from here to Singapore, you're going to have a problem. And so it's more useful to believe that it's round. By the way, there's a common metaphor in English that people usually misunderstand. The metaphor of plain sailing. They think it means ordinary sailing. They think the plane here is like this. That's not it. Plain sailing means you can navigate on the assumption that your ship is traveling on a plane, because if you're, for example, you're on a lake, you can neglect the fact that the Earth is round. The curvature of the Earth doesn't matter enough. So for your general education, you ought to beware of the mistaken interpretations of this perfectly legitimate metaphor. Okay, that's just a footnote. Now we're back struggling with these views. I think the pragmatic, I mean, I might as well put it in words of one syllable. I think the pragmatic theory and the coherence theory haven't got a hope. I mean, they're just hopeless. Richard Rorty's theory was even worse. I'm sorry Richard's dead, because I enjoy, I mean, for various other reasons too, but I enjoyed debating with him on these issues, and he held that the view that when we say the proposition is true, that's like a pat on the back. It's like saying, good going, proposition. You're doing a great job. I think that's not a very profound philosophical conception. So I think some version of the correspondence theory has to be right. It's just that we have to state it in such a way that avoids these objections. Okay, questions about all of that? Because this is, a lot of people think this is really the heart of anybody's philosophy of language, is the theory of truth, because you have to answer the question, how does language relate to reality? And the favorite word for describing that relation is true. Yes?
Could you repeat the third objection to the
Correspondence theory. Yeah, there are different versions of it, but it goes something like this. There cannot be a genuine relation of correspondence and facts because there are not two separately identifiable terms. If you ask, what is the relation between the statement that snow is white and the fact that snow is white, there's no way to answer the question, which fact, without stating a true statement. So the relation cannot be a genuine relation because there are not two independently identifiable terms. And now let's take Frege. Frege thought a fact just is a true statement. That's all there is to a fact, is a true statement. In fact, Frege held three views about statements. He says, the proposition that P, remember his word is Gedanke, thought, the proposition that P and the proposition that P is true are the same proposition. There's no difference between P and P is true. And that's an early version of disquotation. The proposition that P and the proposition that P is true are the same thought. And then he said that a truth is indefinable. We cannot give a definition of truth because that's really all you can say is that the proposition that P and proposition that P is true are the same proposition. And then his third claim was the notion of a fact is just the notion of a true proposition. There isn't any difference between a fact and a true proposition. Now that last point I think can't be right because in ordinary English and German, the word for fact can function in statements about causal relations, which aren't at all like the way true propositions function. The fact that Obama perceives electoral problems is the cause of his now touring the country making speeches. But the proposition is not the cause. Propositions don't in that way act as causes in a way that facts do. The fact that Napoleon perceived a danger to his left flank caused him to order Marshal Ney to move his troops. So I don't think it's right to say that a fact is a true proposition. I think that's definitely wrong. But then we have a serious question. What is a fact? I mean, we talk about facts all the time. What are they? And how do we identify them in a way that avoids these objections? Okay, well, I haven't told you my views yet. Now I'm going to tell you Tarski's views, but let's take more questions. I mean, I'm glad you asked the question, but it's kind of a boring question, because all I do to answer it is repeat what I said already. Yeah. Yeah, well, the third proposition, the pragmatists thought they were going to oppose traditional metaphysics. Well, what the hell? Let's just do what's useful. Let's go with it. Let's think of what's the most useful thing to have, and that's truth. And all those old metaphysicians about realism and idealism, pragmatism, it's a sort of good common sense American way of thinking about things, and we're just going to think, does the damn thing work, and how does it work, you see? And this was supposed to, this annoyed Europeans and pleased a lot of Americans. They thought it was an expression of our down-to-earth realism here, but of course realism is already too metaphysical for them. These, by the way, all of these national distinctions don't mean what they used to in philosophy. A famous French intellectual historian, Bruno Latour, came to interview me, and he said, "Have you been heavily influenced by Davey?" Davey? The famous American philosopher Davey. God, I know I have not even been influenced by him. I never heard of him. Well, it turns out, this is a famous guy's name is Bruno Latour. He was giving me the French pronunciation of John Dewey. And of course, I guess, yeah, if you get the accents right, it comes out as Davey, I suppose. But in any case, I had to say, no, I read one book by Davey, his book on logic, and I thought it was the worst book on logic I'd ever read in my life. I mean, maybe he wrote other good books, but that one was not a good one. The great American philosophers who influenced me were Frege, Wittgenstein, and, well, Strawson and Austin. Yeah, those are the great American philosophers. So I think these national influences aren't what they were before the age of jet travel. In any case, where were we? Oh, yeah, we were, well, I'm not sure I answered the question, but anyway, let's get another question. Yeah, the coherence theory, well, unfortunately, I'm in a way the wrong guy to do this. It's a bit like asking Voltaire to explain the Trinity, you see, because I don't believe in it, but anyway, here's how it goes. If you want to know whether or not a proposition is true, don't look at some metaphysical relation between the proposition and reality. Look at how the proposition fits into things you already believe or know. And it's the coherence of all of that that constitutes truth. Now, something like coherence was sort of made respectable by Davidson and Quine. I mean, not old-fashioned coherence, but something like it, because Davidson did say the only thing that can support a belief is another belief. So what we have to look at is the relationship among all of our beliefs, what Quine calls the web of belief. So there are versions of the coherence theory that are sort of, well, I won't say fashionable, but at least were influential. And the idea was that when you're looking for truth, what you're really looking for is a set of systematic relationships between propositions or sentences, and that's really what truth amounts to. It amounts to the coherence of the system of your relationships. But that seems to me obviously a false conception of truth, because you can have a coherent system which is false. I mean, Marxism was a classic case. The whole system cohered beautifully. You could explain anything that occurred. I mean, as they used to say, Trotskyites used to say, Trotsky was so far ahead of his time that many of his beliefs still haven't come true. And this was a proof of his profound understanding of reality. He's just so far ahead of his time. Well, okay, if you can get away with saying that, then you can say anything. That's the coherence theory. So I'm not sympathetic. I'm the wrong guy to explain the coherence theory because I think it's obviously false. But that's the idea. The idea of it is that truth consists not in a relation between representations and reality, because there isn't any such relation. Rather, a truth consists of coherence of the set of representations. I saw hands up. You usually have your hand up. Let's go ahead. Yeah, yeah. No, let me try to state this clearly. Let's take another representation. I now see my hand in front of my face. But how do I know that I am seeing my hand in front of my face? Because, of course, all I can actually see is a hand, right? So to know that I am seeing my hand in front of my face, I'd have to jump outside myself and come around from the side and look, yeah, that guy, he's seeing that hand in front of his face. But I can't do that. You might think, well, I can do it. I'll look at you and see if you're seeing your hand in front of your face. That's no good because you're going to have the same problem. I am seeing Searle seeing his hand in front of his face. Oh, really? Are you really seeing that? Well, you better jump outside yourself and see if you can survey that relation. You see, let me state the point again. If I think the adequacy of representation and reality consists of a match between what's going on in this guy and what's going on out there, then I can never survey that relation to see if it's adequate because this is all I see. If I'm that guy, that's all I can see is this thing here. I cannot see my seeing. I can see the object, but I can't see my seeing of the object. And it's no good for me to call over my Uncle Chet. He's very reliable on just about everything. I mean, when I need car repairs, I ask Uncle Chet. Okay, but I can't say, Uncle Chet, am I really seeing that? Because all he can see is my seeing it, but he can't see his seeing of my seeing it. He's got the same problem all over again. Yes? Well, here, this is supposed to be an objection to the correspondence conception of the relation of representation and reality. And I don't agree with any of this, but I'm telling you what these guys believe, and they're smart guys, so we have to respect them. And the way that the argument goes is this. If the correspondence relation were adequate to explain truth, and indeed the relationship of mind and language on the one hand and reality on the other, then in order to know that mind and language were adequate to reality, there would have to be some standpoint that was not mental, that was not linguistic, that was outside of mind and language, where we could look from the side and see if mind and language over here was adequately representing the reality over there. And the answer to that is there is no such standpoint. We're always locked into the system of our own representations. Yes? Well, this is another problem, and this is a general problem in epistemology that doesn't have any special bearing on the correspondence theory of truth, but it's a very important issue. How is it that perfectly rational people confronted with exactly the same evidence can arrive at inconsistent conclusions? What's going on in that case? And there are lots of cases like that, where the evidence, all of the evidence we'll suppose, in, and yet there are alternative hypotheses that are perfectly consistent, and rational people can hold alternative hypotheses. Indeed, here's the problem, to put it more dramatically. For any hypothesis and any evidence, there are really an infinite number of different hypotheses that can be made consistent with that evidence. You're never forced to the conclusion that the earth is round. The evidence is overwhelming, but you can always invent alternative hypotheses that will count for the evidence. We've all been subject to a systematic hallucinations about the roundness of the earth. They're all, I mean, it's a crazy hypothesis, but you can always make alternative hypotheses inconsistent with the evidence by fiddling around with the arrangements, by fiddling around with the details. Okay, so that's a very deep and general philosophical point. You had your hand up. Yeah. Yeah. The correspondence, the coherence theory says, look, of course, you're always figuring out more things. You're always bringing in more stuff to compare with what you already know. But there's no way you can ever get outside the whole system. And Quine liked to use an analogy that he got from Neurath. We're on a ship, and we have to keep rebuilding the ship, but where the ship is all the time afloat. And so we've got to replace, it's a wooden ship, we replace planks in the ship, and that's a hell of a problem, because what do you do when you take the plank out and the water starts pouring in? Well, you better put the new plank in pretty fast. So we never get off of the ship of our own representations, but what you do to keep the ship going is fix it up. You get new evidence that comes in and you adjust it to fit what you already know and believe. But you're trapped inside the web, what Quine calls the web of belief. You're always trapped inside your own web. And there's no way to get outside that web. There's no non-linguistic standpoint, no non-mental standpoint from which you can survey the relations between language and mind on the one hand and reality on the other. Okay, other question. You want another try? And then you. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's another problem. Yeah, that's a different problem. The problem we're facing here is a problem about the adequacy of evidence to the reality that it's supposed to be evidence for. And the idea here is you can have the evidence and it can be adequate or inadequate to reality, but there's no way you can get outside the system of evidence to survey the relation between evidence and reality. Yes, this guy behind you, and then you. So going straight up, you. Yeah. Yeah. Well, at this period in his life, later on he abandoned it. At this period in his life, Wittgenstein thought that all facts consisted of arrangements of objects. So there could be a fact that this object was on top of that object. But there couldn't be such a thing as a negative fact because there weren't any negative objects or negative relations. There were just actual objects standing in actual relations. That's why I thought there couldn't be any negative facts. Yes, you're next. Yes, yeah, I do. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I think it is a fact that there are no elephants in this room. I'll just look around. Somebody says, now, come on. It says court trial. Can you swear that there were no elephants in the room? Absolutely swear. I looked around very carefully. Now, I'm not counting elephants the size of my thumb, but your average zoo-sized element, that was definitely not in the room. And I might add, it's just a plain fact that there were no damn elephants in that damn room. You have to add these obscenities to sort of give more punch to it, to make it sound like you really believe it. I don't think there's a problem about negative facts. Now, there are some problems. Here's a problem. It's a deep problem, and that's this. It is a fact, let's say, that all ravens are black. What? No, I haven't given you my defense of the correspondence theory. I'm just telling you what these other guys. I'll tell you what I believe later. But you challenged me. Well, am I confident there are negative facts? You bet I am. Absolutely. And I think it is a philosophical pathology to think, well, there can't be negative facts. And I think here I adopt a kind of Wittgensteinian approach. Look at how these words are used. And it's just a fact that we use the word fact as it occurs in sentences of the form. It is a fact that not such and such. It is a plain fact that such and such didn't happen. It's a plain fact that there was no major earthquake in California yesterday, for example, fortunately. Now, tomorrow, that's another problem. Okay, so I was going to tell you a problem about facts, and that is you can have logically equivalent statements that apparently don't state the same fact. So it is a fact that all ravens are black, but all ravens are black if and only if all non-black things are non-ravens. Does everybody see that? That is, all ravens are black says that the class of ravens is included in the class of black things. But that'll be true if and only if. That fact will obtain if and only if all non-black things, all the things that are not black, are non-ravens. So it looks like the class of all non-black things has to be included in the class of non-ravens. And is that the same fact as the fact that all ravens are black? Or is it a different fact? Well, we'll come to that. I'm not giving you all the answers. I'm just telling you what the problems are. Okay, now there was a great breakthrough in this whole discussion when Tarski presented what he called the semantic theory of truth. And a lot of people said, well, it's not really the correspondence theory because Tarski was too smart for the correspondence theory. But it's important that Tarski thought it was a version of the correspondence theory, that he thought what he was doing was defending a kind of a correspondence conception of language. And the favorite guy that people always quote here is Aristotle. Aristotle said, to say of that which is that it is, and to say of that which is not that it is not, is to state the truth. Now that's an early version of the correspondence theory. Why didn't he use the notion of correspondence to facts? Oddly enough, fact is a fairly late addition to language. I don't know Greek well enough to know this, but my bet would be there was no Greek word for fact, as there was no word in the modern European languages until fairly recently, within the past 1,000 years. And fact, in fact, comes from Latin, facere, meaning to do, and a fact is the, so to speak, the done thing. It's the past of facere, and it's the same in French. Le fait, again, is le fait accompli. It's the done thing. And Tatsache in German, also the same thing. It means literally the thing, Sache, which is done, the Tatsache. So it's a fairly recent addition, but the idea that statements are true because they somehow fit or match or adequately describe how things are in the real world, that is what drives the correspondence theory and what Tarski thought he was defending. However, Tarski insisted on certain constraints on his account, and that is it must not use any semantic terms. It would be circular if you said a statement is true if it corresponds to a fact, because you understand corresponds to a fact only if you understand true. You can't use any of these semantic notions like corresponds to. So that was one of his conditions on his account, and I might as well list these conditions, what he thought he was doing. On the one hand, he thought you've got to defend this idea that statements describe how things really are if they're true. So that's correspondence. In some sense of correspondence, I'll put quotes around it to mark the fact that it's not in a naive sense of correspondence. Secondly, it has to be no semantic terms. You can't use any semantic terms in your definition of truth. And a third, he thought that a definition that he gave of truth had to solve the paradoxes, had to solve the liar paradox. And the liar paradox, he thought, inflicted most accounts of truth that he had seen, and indeed most accounts of language. The liar paradox is the paradox of the guy who says this statement is false. Now, if he says this statement is false, then if what he says is true, it's false. But if it's false, it's true. And in logic, that's bad news. You don't want to have that, because all hell breaks loose if you get the liar paradox. So he wanted to solve the liar paradox. Now, what he does, and I might as well add this as a fourth condition, is he wanted a clear distinction between the meta-language, which is the language we use to talk about language, and the object language, which is the language itself. So if I say in English, in French, the verb aller means to go, that is a metalinguistic statement about an object language, French using English as the meta-language. And Tarski thought that the problems that arose from truth were often a result of a failure to see that it is a meta-linguistic predicate. It is a predicate that is used to describe other linguistic entities. So let's treat those as our four core conditions of adequacy. We're going to explain what's right about the correspondence theory, but there are going to be no semantic terms. We're going to solve the liar paradox, and we're going to keep a clear distinction between the meta-language and meta-linguistic predicates and the object language, the language that we're talking about. Now let's stop for questions. I see a lot of people looking puzzled. Are all those clear? Yes. Yes, Aristotle said, I don't know Greek, so I just have to believe the translators, but it sounds like Aristotle, and it sounds like it's not a hard notion to translate. Here's how it goes. To say of that which is that it is, and to say of that which is not that it is not, is to speak the truth. That's just what truth is. Saying of what is that it is, and of what is not that it is not. And that looks to me like the correspondence theory, because it says there's something independent of the saying which makes what you say true or false. And there's a fairly recent notion, which I think is pretty useful, and that's the notion of a truth maker. The idea is that for any true statement, there's something in virtue of which, something that makes it true, and that thing that makes it true is the truth maker. And it's generally the case that a statement is made true by something independent of the statement. There are truth makers. There are some odd exceptions to that, but they're not serious. So, for example, if I say, I am now speaking in English in this sentence, well, there is a truth maker, but the truth maker is not independent of the sentence, because the sentence I said in English was a sentence to the effect that the sentence itself was in English. So that, but the general point about truth makers is they're independent of the statements made. Yes, you had your hand up. Yeah.
The problem is, how can you say it is not if it isn't?
Yeah. Well, that is a metaphysical worry, and you mark yourself as a philosopher by finding that worrisome. How can you say that it isn't if there isn't anything there to say that it isn't? I mean, I don't know how to say this, but it's something like that. I mean, how can it be the case that I can say there are no elephants in the room if there aren't even any elephants in the room for me to talk about to say that there are no elephants? Now, that is this is the point where you have to have a naive statement of the philosophical question, and we have to be able to answer that. How can there be negative facts if there's no fact there to correspond to the negative statement? If I say, there's at least one leather briefcase in this room, well, here's the fact. It corresponds to that statement. But if I say there are no elephants in the room, show me the fact. Point. Do I point to the elephant-free room? I mean, that seems odd, because then it looks like, among other problems, the very same fact that corresponds to there are no elephants in the room is the fact that corresponds to there are no giraffes in the room. And that's troublesome, because we want to say those ought to be different facts and different truth makers. Now, I'm going to answer all those questions, but I'm not there yet. I'm still telling you what other people think. And now I'm going to explain to you Tarski's what he called a semantic theory of truth. He called it a semantic theory because the word true was supposed to express a semantic property, a metalinguistic property, a property that other entities had. Now, the actual statement of this is in a famous article by Tarski, originally published in German. It's called Wahrheitsbegriff in den formalisierten Sprache. Yeah, and what he's saying is that he's going to explain the concept of truth in fully formalized languages. Now, like Frege, Tarski had great contempt for ordinary language. He thought ordinary English, maybe he liked Polish, but he didn't like ordinary languages much. So he thought an honest-to-John scientific language ought to be fully formalized. It ought to look like logical language of the sort that Frege had invented with the predicate calculus. So what he's going to do is give a definition of truth that applies to fully formalized languages. He's going to use a fragment of English, and he's going to use English as both the meta-language and the object language. All right, now you can refer to your sheet, the handout sheet, because what I've done here is give you a Tarski-style semantic definition without the set theory. As I gave you Frege without tears, this is Tarski without set theory. And the actual statement in the original article is very long and, includes a whole lot of set theoretical apparatus. But I want you to see in a simplified version what the idea is, what the method is by which he defines true in a way that will enable him to meet these conditions, especially the second condition. There are no semantic terms used in the definition. But I've done it here in a way that avoids the set theoretical apparatus that he used, because that's very complicated and it takes a long time to explain it, and I'm not sure I understand it myself. Okay, so here are conditions of adequacy that he gives. The definition must satisfy convention T, and I might as well write that down as a fifth condition of adequacy, convention T. And you remember convention T is the convention that for any sentence S is true if and only if P, where in that open sentence you substitute the name of S for S or some other expression identifying S, and on the right-hand side you substitute that same sentence but without the quotation marks. So on the left-hand side you have an expression which he thought was the name of a sentence. I don't think it is, but anyway, that's what he thought. Snow is white is true, and then on the right-hand side you drop the quotation marks if and only if snow is white. So the definition of truth has to satisfy convention T. It has to satisfy the convention that for any sentence S is true if and only if P, where for S you substitute the name of a sentence, and for P you substitute the sentence itself. You put the very same thing without the quotation marks, and that now has acquired a name that Tarski didn't use, but it's now standard in the philosophical literature. It's called disquotation, for the obvious reason that you, on the left-hand side, you disquote, on the right-hand side, you disquote the left-hand side. You drop the quotation marks. Okay, so that's his first condition that he makes explicit. And then the second condition, as I've already written down, is this one here. There can't be any semantic terms. It would be circular if we use words like situation, fact, state of affairs. It's just got to be ordinary English terms. There cannot be any semantic terms. Okay, but now what we do is we define the terms of a simple language. It's a very Mickey Mouse language. It's only got a fragment, a tiny fragment of English. It contains names, Bill, John, Sam, for example, and it contains predicates. Is tall, is bald, is drunk. And it contains the logical constants, and, or, not, and if then. Now that has formation rules of the language. It's a formalized language, so it has very strict formation rules. Atomic sentences are formed by prefixing a name to a predicate. So Bill is tall will be an atomic sentence because you put a name in front of one of the predicates. Molecular sentences are formed by combining sentences with logical constants. Molecular sentences may be composed of atomic sentences or other molecular sentences. So the two atomic sentences, Bill is tall and Sam is bald, can be combined to form a single molecular sentence. Bill is tall and Sam is bald. All right, now then, that's a simple apparatus. Does everybody see that? You got a very simple set of syntactical rules. The syntactical rules enable you to make sentences out of words and enable you to make complex or molecular or sentences out of atomic sentences. Okay, now we start with the semantics of the atomic sentence. An atomic sentence is true if the object referred to by the name satisfies the predicate. So Sam is true if and only, Sam is bald is true if and only if Sam is bald. Now notice, however, that won't do because it's got these semantic notions in it. It's got the notion of refer and satisfies. It says the object referred to satisfies a predicate, but that's what we're trying to explain. We're trying to explain how the object referred to can satisfy the predicate in a way that makes the statement true, but we're going to do that without using these semantic notions. But anyway, atomic sentences thus satisfy convention T. Now comes the key step, and this is the so to speak, the gimmick that enables Tarski to satisfy this condition, to get rid of the semantic terms. What we do here is we define refers and satisfies by recursion. We list all of the cases individually. So we say E refers to O if and only if. E is the word Bill and O is the object Bill, where E is an expression and O an object. So E refers if and to O if and only if, and then you just give a list of all the cases. The word Bill refers to Bill, the word Sam refers to Sam, and the word John refers to John. You simply list by a recurring procedure, by a recursive procedure that you apply over and over, and so that you have all of the cases. And then you do the same thing with satisfies. An object O satisfies a predicate if an object O satisfies a predicate P if and only if, and then you list all the cases. The object is bald, and the predicate is bald. Then if that's the case, then the object will satisfy the predicate is bald. Or O is tall, and P is, the expression is tall. Or O is drunk, and P is drunk. How did drunken, I got there. Well, I must have had other things on my mind when I wrote this. Anyway, okay, so now what we've done is this. We got rid of refers and satisfies just by giving a list of all of the cases. We've now got rid of the semantic terms. We don't need any semantic terms. We're just using ordinary English words here, like bald and Bill and John and Sam and drunk and all the rest of it. Okay, now that eliminates any semantic terms from the definition of truth. So we've now satisfied the second condition of adequacy. We've satisfied the condition of adequacy because we got rid of the semantic terms refers and satisfied simply by recursion. We list all of the cases. And now we can define truth for molecular sentences. The truth conditions for each logical constant can be defined in terms of the truth of the atomic sentences in the usual way. So P and Q is true if and only if P is true and Q is true. It sounds boring, and it should sound boring because it's meant to be trivial. It gives you a trivial account of the logical constants using English as a meta-language. Now we get to the punchline. Since truth for molecular sentences is defined in terms of truth for atomic sentences, And the truth of atomic sense is defined in terms of reference and satisfaction. And reference and satisfaction are eliminated by recursion. We've now satisfied all the conditions of adequacy. We have a definition of truth that satisfies condition T and uses no semantic notions. Notice that it enables us to solve the liar paradox. I didn't put that on the sheet because it's meaningless to say this sentence is true, because truth is a predicate of the meta-language, and it has to be some distinct sentence which you say is true. The sentence can't say of itself that it's true. That would be meaningless. It would violate the formation rules of the language, because truth is a semantic predicate. Truth is a predicate of the meta-language used to describe sentences in the object language, and a sentence can't be both in the meta-language and in the object language. So it looks like we've solved all of our problems. And for a long time, this, like Russell's theory of descriptions, was taken to be a model of how to do philosophy. I mean, you could really solve a problem just by applying the logical apparatus. And it's a sad news, I have to tell you, that I think it fails completely, because what we want from a definition is a statement of what all the things have in common that satisfies, that enable us to use the predicate we're defining. So if I say a triangle is a three-sided plane figure, I'm saying all triangles have in common that they are three-sided plane figures, and that's what makes them triangles. But Tarski doesn't do that. You want to know, what do all true statements have in common that makes them true? See, that's what the correspondence theory and all these other theories were trying to answer. What do all true statements have in common in virtue of which they're true? Tarski doesn't do that. He just says, well, if the statement is Sam is bald, then it's true if there's this guy Sam and he's bald. Yes, and so on through all the other cases. But he doesn't tell you what do all true statements have in common that makes them true. And that's what we have to do. That's the condition we have to meet. Now, one critic of Tarski pointed this out, and he said, look, it's as if somebody said, what's the definition of a chemical element? What's a chemical element? And somebody says, well, something's a chemical element if it's hydrogen or nitrogen or oxygen or a carbon and so on, and just gives a list of all the chemical elements. That's no good. That doesn't tell you what they all have in common. Or somebody says, define the word city. Okay, and I tell you, here's the definition. Something is a city if and only if it's identical with San Francisco or Portland or Sacramento, and then I just list all the cities in the world. Another way to see that is Tarski's definition only works for a fixed language. If I introduce a new predicate, truth isn't defined for that predicate. It's only defined for a language where you have a list of the terms of the language already fixed, but a new term upsets the definition. And that's not what we want. What we want is a definition of truth that will tell you the property that all true statements have in common, in virtue of which they are true. And I'll do that next week.